Tomorrow was supposed to be my last day. 31 years in the same machine plant, and I figured I'd walk out with a handshake, maybe a beer from the guys. I even brought donuts for the floor crew, 12 glaze, 12 chocolate, all still warm. We'd have a laugh, maybe swap a few old stories before I turned in my badge. Instead, I walked into the break room and found Tanner Holt waiting. 38 years old, hair too perfect for a factory, and always smelling like whatever overpriced cologne was in fashion. He didn't say morning, didn't offer me a seat, just slid a manila folder across the table like he was serving a court summons. "Effective immediately," he said, eyes fixed on the folder. "Your position's been dissolved due to restructuring." I opened it. My name, today's date. The pension number I'd been counting on. Gone. "That's final?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my knuckles tightened on the edge of the table. He nodded without looking at me. Of course he didn't look. They never do when they know what they're taking. I knew exactly why. They didn't want to pay the $1.6 million I'd earned in retirement benefits. Tanner was a numbers guy, always talking about efficiency and agility, but he never bothered to learn the old control system I built. That system kept this place running since the 90s, and it was the reason half the newer lines didn't blow themselves to pieces. I closed the folder, slid it into my bag, and stood up. The box of donuts sat between us. He didn't reach for one. In the hall, I scanned my badge one last time. The reader lit green, the door buzzed open. That sound used to mean the start of another day. Now it just sounded like a door slamming shut. No big send-off, no good luck. Just me, boots on the same concrete floor I'd walked for 3 decades. The hum of the machines felt different now, more distant, like they knew. I passed the forging line, the assembly bays, the control room where I'd spent more hours than I could count. Guys looked up from their stations. Some nodded, most didn't. No one wanted Tanner's eyes on them for too long. At the exit, I paused. The air outside smelled like oil and cold steel. My truck was parked where it always was, same spot since '97. They thought they'd just cut me loose, clean break, no mess. But as I slid behind the wheel, one thought settled in my mind like a well-placed bolt. They have no idea what they've just shut off. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The old spiral notebook lay open in front of me, same one I'd hauled around for decades, pages yellowed and edges curled. The handwriting was small, tight, a mix of numbers and shorthand commands only I could read. This was where the shop's control system had been born. I wrote the logic from scratch, tested it on weekends, even built in safety redundancies nobody asked for. I'd spent months crawling through conduit runs and control cabinets, mapping every limit switch and sensor until I knew the plant better than my own house. 15 years back, I'd started seeing odd readings in the material orders, steel coming in light, numbers on the books not matching what we were melting down. I traced it to someone skimming inventory and cooking the reports. I flagged it, thinking I was doing my job. Management buried it within a week. Next thing I knew, I was off oversight work and shuffled into a corner with a hard-to-work-with label pinned to my back. Years later, they tried something worse. Wanted me to sign off on quarterly reports padded with phantom production numbers. If I played along, they said, my son would get a guaranteed trade school scholarship. I refused. Funny thing, offer disappeared the next day. That's when I made the change. I wrote a clause into the master system code, tucked in with all the other safeguards. I called it the Retirement Transfer Protocol. If I left on my own terms, it would hand over full control to whoever was next, no interruptions. But if I got canned without warning, it would lock down. No unauthorized edits, no admin access until it was cleared by the original architect. It wasn't some Hollywood virus to burn the place down. I didn't believe in that crap. It was just a line in the sand, protecting a machine I'd built to be safe and honest from people who'd cut corners for a quarterly report. Nobody ever asked about it. Nobody read deep enough into the design documents to even see it, and I never volunteered the information. If you were the kind of person who'd care, you'd have found it. Tanner sure didn't. He skimmed what he needed for a PowerPoint slide and tossed the rest in a drawer. If he'd read the originals, he would have seen my name right next to the clause in black ink. He would have known what termination without succession actually triggered. I closed the notebook and leaned back, the kitchen chair creaking under me. Somewhere, right now, the system was still humming. Same as always, only Not. The difference was buried deep, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. And as of yesterday, I was the only one left who did. At 8:31 a.m., the first crack showed. In the control room at the forging plant in Ohio, the operators started getting red bars across their screens, error codes they'd never seen before. Every attempt to restart the line ended with the same response. Authentication failed. They tried the usual resets, killing and reloading the process logic. Nothing. Within minutes, that same alert was flashing in Iowa, then Michigan, then Pennsylvania. On the floor, machines froze mid-cycle, conveyor belts locked in place, hydraulics stopped cold, half-melted billets sat stuck under open furnace doors, heat bleeding out into the air. Tier 2 techs got called in, the kind who could usually remote in and fix things while eating lunch. They plugged into the root system, access denied, tried the second-tier admin codes, denied. Finally went for the nuclear option, the hard-coded backup key locked in Tanner Holt's office safe. Even that came back dead. One of the lead engineers pulled up the system status page. A prompt was blinking at the bottom, something most of them had never seen before. Verification required, A. Ralston Protocol. That stopped them. My name was still buried in the core, same as it had been for 10 years. They started digging for the original system documentation, the thick binders I'd kept in the control archive. All they found was a single encrypted master file, last modified by me, 2013. By 9:20, the outage wasn't just a glitch on a few lines. More facilities were going dark. Trucks sat half-loaded in the bays with drivers standing around smoking, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Dispatch phones were lighting up. Tanner was yanked out of his office and hauled into the control room. He stood over the operators, scanning the mess of locked screens and blinking warnings. "Just bypass it," he snapped. The lead engineer didn't even look at him. "It's not a bypass issue. This is deliberate behavior written into the core logic." Tanner's face tightened. "Are you telling me somebody's doing this on purpose?" "I'm telling you it's doing exactly what it was built to do," the engineer said. "And unless you have the original architect, you're not getting past that prompt." They tried every route, calling in contractors, escalating through IT security, even bringing in the software vendor for the original PLCs. The vendor told them point blank, without the protocol's verification handshake, nothing would execute. By 9:45, the plant-to-plant chatter was full-blown panic. Supervisors were shouting over each other, talking penalties for late shipments, raw material spoilage, contracts breached. Tanner barked orders into his headset, flipping between calls with the legal department and the board. Every minute he spent in that room, the silence on the floor got louder, the hum of production replaced by the hiss of idle machinery cooling in place. No one in that building knew it yet, but the moment he signed my termination, this was already in motion. The calls started before the coffee reheated. First it was legal. A woman with a clipped voice said, "Mr. Ralston, we need your immediate assistance to remediate." "HR already ended me," I said. "I'm not authorized to work on your systems." Silence. Then, "We can discuss temporary engagement terms." "Not your call," I said, and hung up. 2 minutes later, HR tried. "Albert, we're hoping you can consult." "You terminated me yesterday," I said. "Policy says non-employees don't touch company assets." "That's correct," she admitted. "However," I let the however die on a dial tone. Tanner called next. I watched his name vibrate across the screen and let it ring. He called again. Voicemail, again, voicemail. By 10, the story hit local news. The TV over my stove showed drone footage of trucks lined up at our Ohio plant. Anchors tossing out words like unprecedented and cascading disruption. The ticker read, "Midwest manufacturing operations halted by system failure." My phone lit with hashtags I didn't ask for. 5 minutes later, legal again, this time with someone from the board patched in. A tight male voice said, "Mr. Ralston, the company would like to offer immediate reinstatement and double your retirement package upon resolution." "Send it in writing," I said. They did. A courier van rolled up 20 minutes after that, hazard lights strobing against my front window. A kid in a navy windbreaker jogged up, held out a thick envelope, and clicked a pen like he was about to witness a signature that would put his kids through college. I took the packet and closed the door. At my kitchen table, I flipped through pages stuffed with language someone pulled together in a panic. Temporary reinstatement, indemnities, clawbacks cloaked as performance milestones, a non-disparagement clause bolded like a threat. Buried near the end sat the offer line, reinstatement at prior title, pension payout doubled upon successful restoration of operations. I set the docket down, picked up my phone, and called Tanner. He answered on the first quarter ring. "Al," he said, breathless, "just sign this. We'll get you back in the system and fix this." "It won't work," I said. "What do you mean it won't work?" "The protocol only responds to an active employee at the moment of termination," I said. "That moment's gone. Static." Then a sharp inhale. "There has to be an override." "There isn't," I said. "That's the point." He swore under his breath. Paper rustled on his end, voices in the background pressing him for answers he didn't have. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "we're offering double. We're trying to make this right." "You can offer 10 times," I said. "The handshake already happened and you cut the hand off. The system saw that. Then write a patch." "I'm not your employee," I said. "We'll convert you. That's the contract. You're reinstated effective on signature." "And the protocol still won't care," I said. "It needed leave succession at termination. You didn't plan for it. You didn't read." "Read what?" "The original design documents," I said. 10 years ago, I spelled this out. Termination without succession triggers full authentication lock until verified by original architect under continuous employment. It's in there word for word. "I never saw that." "I know." Another voice cut in, someone from legal on speaker. "Mr. Ralston, hypothetically, if you were to return for 24 hours, could you—" "No," I said. "You missed the window." "That's absurd," Tanner snapped. "We can't have a system that refuses to recognize the owner." "That system recognizes stewards," I said. "Ownership was your word, not mine." Silence stretched. Somewhere behind him, an alarm chattered and cut off. He came back colder. "If this continues, there will be significant damages. I need you to understand the position you're putting the company in." "I understood your position yesterday," I said. "You made it clear." "Al," he tried again, softer, "help me out here." "I did," I said. "In 2013. You just didn't read it." He didn't have an answer for that. I slid the contract back into the envelope, walked to the door, and pressed it into the courier's hands. "Return to sender." The kid blinked. "You're not signing?" "No." He nodded, tucked the packet under his arm, and jogged back to the van. I watched the brake light stutter, then fade as it pulled away. Then I picked up my phone, scrolled to Tanner's name, and hit end to close the call still hanging open on my screen. By noon, the ripple had turned into a flood. 8 out of 10 lines across the company sat dead, their indicator lights glowing red like a Christmas display no one wanted. Forklifts sat idle, pallets stacked to the ceiling. Orders that should have been halfway to distributors were still sitting in the bays, gathering dust. A foreman from Michigan called me, probably using his personal phone, asking if I could just walk them through the bypass. I told him I couldn't. HR had made it clear I wasn't authorized to touch company property. He swore under his breath and hung up. By 12:15, the news tickers were already dragging them. Midwest manufacturing crippled by system failure. Stock plunges amid production freeze. I saw the numbers in real time. Shares down 12%, then 17, then 21. Trading halted before lunch. They tried throwing bodies at it. Contractors, outside IT firms, even a couple of retired engineers they hadn't bothered to keep in touch with. None of them had the keys to the root logic. Every one of them ran headfirst into the same wall I'd built. The engineers pitched a rebuild, clean slate. But even their optimism came with a 6-month timeline and a $400 million price tag. And that was before factoring in lost contracts and penalties from every client depending on just-in-time delivery. At 1:40, I heard from a buddy still on the floor in Ohio. Tanner had been called upstairs to face the board in person. Word was they weren't interested in his unexpected outage speech anymore. They wanted to know why the man who built the system had been shoved out with zero transition, and why no one had so much as read the documentation before they did it. By 2 o'clock, the answer came down. Tanner Holt, Mr. Efficiency, Mr. Agility, was suspended pending review. In plain language, he was done. He walked out with his tie crooked, No box in his hands, just a phone glued to his ear and a look that said the ground had disappeared under him. I can't say I felt joy exactly. It was more like watching a machine overheat exactly the way you told them it would. They'd gambled my 31 years of work against their own arrogance, and they'd lost. And now, the meter was still running. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge when I powered up my old secure laptop. I hadn't touched it in years, still had the sticker from an industry expo peeling off the lid. I typed in the long password from muscle memory, waited for the encrypted mail client to wake up, and opened a blank message. I didn't dress it up. No legal jargon, no theatrics. Subject: Statement on Midwest Manufacturing System Event. I wrote, I have not accessed or altered any company systems since my termination. The behavior currently occurring is an automated safeguard written into the control logic years ago. Its sole function is to protect the system from unethical removal of its original architect without a proper succession process. Then I attached the file, an email I sent to the old board in 2015. In it, I'd laid it out plain. If the system's guardianship is violated, it will stop listening. No threats, no demands, just the truth. I hit send to a half-dozen industry mailing lists I still had in my contacts. I figured that would be it. But within an hour, the file was everywhere. Someone on one of those lists forwarded it to a trade forum, and from there, it leaked into the public feeds. The comments came fast. He warned them. They laughed. The system remembered. Then someone screenshotted one line from my statement. I only withdrew the one thing I truly owned, my trust. That line started popping up in post signatures, slapped over photos of idle plants, even printed on a t-shirt in one picture. My phone buzzed with messages from old coworkers. Some wrote short, "Proud of you, Al." Others told stories I'd forgotten, about fixes I'd made, or fights I'd picked when safety or honesty was on the line. A few admitted they'd been told to keep their distance from me after that steel skimming incident years ago. I didn't answer most of them. It wasn't about gloating or settling scores. It was about setting the record straight before Tanner or the board tried to spin me as some rogue operator sabotaging my machine. They'd made it theirs the day they showed me the door. The system disagreed. By late afternoon, even the evening news was reading parts of my statement on air. One anchor looked straight into the camera and said, "It appears Mr. Ralston gave multiple warnings that went unheeded." I closed the laptop and leaned back, hands behind my head. They could scramble all they wanted now, send offers, spin press releases, point fingers. But the truth was in their inboxes and the public record. I didn't need to fight them anymore. The system was already doing it for me. I didn't need to fight them anymore. The system was already doing it for me. By late afternoon, customers started peeling off. First, it was a Tier 2 auto supplier in Indiana, email forwarded to me by a buddy, suspending purchase orders until stability is confirmed. 10 minutes later, a rail gear client in Nebraska pulled 3 months of scheduled runs. Contracts that took years to win evaporated in an hour because no one believed a temporary disruption line when trucks sat empty on live cameras. Then, the competitors smelled blood. Riverton Metals pushed a slick spot onto every feed I checked. Clean floors, bright control panels, a voiceover purring. When your line matters, you trust the shop that won't fail you. The banner at the end might as well have slapped Tanner across the face. The shop you can trust. My phone lit with texts from old buyers I hadn't heard from in years. "Al, is this really baked into the core? We can't ride this out. We have payroll Friday. If they don't have you, we don't have them." I didn't tell them what to do. I didn't have to. By early evening, word around the docks was ugly, cancellations climbing fast. The numbers that trickled through the grapevine were worse. Almost half the key accounts moving their work for the quarter, which was a polite way of saying indefinitely. Inside their building, panic took the shape of binders and red faces. A maintenance lead texted me from a stairwell photo of a conference room table buried in old documentation. They're tearing through the archives, legal, IT, 3 board members. Your name's on everything. They keep asking who signed off on what. Someone just asked when we last reviewed the license. License? That word landed like a hammer, even here at my kitchen table. Back in 2014, I'd cleaned up the legal mess they'd let fester for 2 decades. I rolled the logic layer into my own LLC, put the patent on it, then cross-licensed the framework back to the company. It wasn't a secret. It was paperwork, as plain as the bolts in line 3, use rights contingent on continuous stewardship by the original architect and ongoing employment to preserve guardianship. If either was severed without succession, the use rights ended. No drama, just clauses. At 6:42, the maintenance lead sent another message. They found it. Patent number on the screen, your LLC name in big letters. GC saying something about work for hire. Someone else just pointed at the addendum from 2014 that carved the logic layer out. Room went quiet. I pictured it without much effort. The board chair leaning forward, palms flat. The general counsel flipping back and forth between tabs. Some VP asking if we can just keep running it while we sort the paperwork. The addendum I wrote answered that too. Termination without succession voided their license the second they cut my badge. Another text rolled in, this one from an engineer in Iowa. We just got a freeze email from legal. Cease executing Ralston framework until further notice. They're telling us to power down what's still humming. Trucks are being rerouted to Riverton as we speak. By nightfall, Riverton ran a second ad. Same music, a little louder this time. When others stop listening, we don't. Their sales team posted selfies with clipboards at a customer lot I knew by the faded numbers on the bay doors. In the background, our company's trailers sat with tarps cinched tight and no drivers in sight. I made a sandwich I didn't taste and stood at the sink while the local station replayed my line. I only withdrew the one thing I truly owned, my trust, under a B-roll of forklifts parked at bad angles. Then the anchor cut to sources close to the board, hinting at licensing complications tied to a 2014 filing by a former employee. Complications. That was a kind word for it. My phone buzzed again. One more message from the maintenance lead, shorter this time. They're saying firing you voided their right to run the core. Chairman just asked who approved the termination without a plan. Doors closed. They're going private. I walked to the workshop, pulled open the old file drawer, and slid out a manila folder with the patent ribbon tucked inside. The certificate was stiff and unimpressed, the way paper always is about the things it can do to a room full of executives. I checked the filing date, the addendum number, the line where the license hinged on guardianship, and set it on the bench. In the corner, the shop radio crackled with another Riverton spot. I put the patent back in its sleeve, shut the drawer, and killed the light. I didn't file a lawsuit. I didn't call a press conference. I kept my head down and let the noise burn itself out. The phone rang less each day. Messages turned from frantic to clipped to nothing at all. A week later, a small box showed up on my porch. No return address I recognized. Brown craft paper, tidy string, the kind of careful wrap that says somebody respected what they were sending. I carried it to the workshop and cut the twine. Inside, under a fold of tissue, was a brass plate. Heavy, clean edges, etched in a straight, unapologetic font, Chief Systems Architect, A.L. Ralston, frameworks that protect their makers underneath. A note on a simple white card. Mr. Ralston, some of us build for people, and some of us build for principles. You did both. Respect, from our R&D team. No ask, no contract. Consider this a thank you for the standard you set. No signature, just a logo I knew from those smug ads the other night. Riverton, the shop you can trust. I read the card twice, then slid it back under the plate. There was no sales pitch tucked in, no calendar invite, no let's talk. For once, someone in this business understood the difference between a man and his work. I set the plate on the bench and cleared a spot on the wall over the steel pegboard. The screws bit into the stud with that satisfying resistance that tells you something's going to stay where it's put. I held the plate up, leveled it by eye, and marked the holes with a carpenter's pencil I'd sharpened down to a nub. My phone buzzed while I drilled. Unknown number. I let it roll to voicemail and kept the bit steady. When the anchors were in, I hung the plate and stepped back. The brass caught the shop light and threw a small, quiet glow on the wrenches beneath. I finally checked the missed call. It was a recruiter, probably circling after the headlines. The voicemail was all polish, incredible opportunity, strategic rebuild, your legacy plus scale. I deleted it. Another message waited behind it from a private number. I played that one. Al, this is Chuck from Riverton R&D. No pressure, just wanted to say your statement hit right. If you ever want to grab coffee, not to talk deals, just to talk shop, you've got a chair here. I didn't call back. Not because I had a problem with them, because for the first time in a long while, I didn't owe anyone anything. Not explanations, not hours, not the quiet fixes that kept people who didn't read from sleeping at night. I wiped the dust off the plate with an old t-shirt and looked around the workshop. On one bench, the spiral notebook lay open to a page I'd dog-eared 20 years ago, hand-drawn state diagrams for the first kiln interface I built when we still ran on hardware that hummed like a refrigerator. On another, a carburetor sat in pieces beside a set of feeler gauges. Order, even in the mess. That's what always made sense to me. The news chattered faintly from a radio I kept near the door. Some stock analyst was trying to explain how a license clause could kneecap a conglomerate with a single line of text. He talked like he'd discovered gravity. I turned the volume down until the voices disappeared and only the fan noise remained. A truck rolled past out front and slowed at the curb. For a second I expected a knock. Delivery, lawyer, someone with a pen. But the engine revved and faded away. Good. Not tonight. I went back to the bench and put the car back together, slow and clean. I torqued each screw until the resistance felt right in my wrist. No rush. Nobody waiting on the other side of a glass wall for me to make their shortcut look smart. Just the work and the tool in my hand. When I finished, I set the wrench down and looked up at the brass. It wasn't proof I'd won anything. It wasn't a trophy. It was a marker. A small sign that the idea I'd spent decades holding the line for had landed somewhere it could keep going, even if I wasn't in the room. I killed the shop fan, clicked off the radio, and reached for the light. I didn't set out to punish them. I built the system to defend itself from people who'd treat it like disposable equipment. You don't spend 3 decades tuning a machine to perfection just to watch someone tear it apart because they're chasing quarterly numbers. Tanner's crew thought the code was just wires and logic, something they could swap out like a faulty bearing. But that system had a spine, and I'd given it one for a reason. They never read the fine print, never cared to understand the foundation they were standing on. When they kicked me out without a handshake, they triggered exactly what I designed. People keep asking me if I feel bad about what happened. The truth is, I feel bad it came to this, but not about the result. Some call it revenge. I call it good architecture. Good architecture is built to protect itself when the people in charge stop caring about what keeps it standing. Now, my mornings start in the garage. No alarms, no production schedules, no conference calls. Just the steady clink of a wrench and the smell of old oil. I've got a '72 Chevelle up on the lift. Needs a new transmission, but it's a patient kind of work. No deadlines. Sometimes I miss the hum of the shop floor when everything ran smooth. Not for the output, but for the order. Every gauge where it should be, every line feeding just right, everyone knowing their role without someone shouting about efficiencies. Order like that is rare. They thought I was a relic. Turns out I was the one thing they couldn't replace. You can find another plant manager in a week, but you can't conjure up 31 years of knowing every quirk and heartbeat of a system you built yourself. And the thing about trust, once you burn it, you can't just turn it back on with a key. You have to earn it. They never did. Tanner never tried. The board never cared. They looked at the system as a tool, and at me as an expense. I hear they're still limping along with temporary fixes, consultants flying in and out, each one billing more in a week than I used to make in a month. The production numbers will recover eventually. But the trust, the kind that makes people give their all without checking the clock, that's gone for good. I closed the workshop door, wiping my hands on a rag that's seen better days. The Chevelle will wait for me. Good machines always do. Some folks will read about what happened and call me stubborn. Others will call me vindictive. But anyone who's ever built something worth protecting will understand. If you don't defend your work, someone will come along and strip it for parts. I wasn't about to let that happen. Not to my machine, not to my name. Gates closed.